Hi, good night, everybody. Thank you for logging on to this session. Welcome to the first Ask Wortel live stream of 2021. It's going to be an awesome year. I have some colleagues with me. Sander Derricks, can you introduce yourself for a bit?
Hi, Andries. Nice to be here. Sander Derks. I'm a cloud architect at Wortel. Been working with Wortel for approximately 6-7 months now. A specialization in document management and business productivity. Over 20 years of experience with document management. Well, that's in a nutshell. Back to you.
Thank you, Sander. Thanks. On the other side, it's Friso. Friso, can you tell a bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Friso Visser. I'm a recruitment marketeer at Wortel, but tonight I will be your question master. You can ask all your questions in the live chat in the YouTube box or tweet to us with hashtag AskWortel, and I will make sure that everything will be delivered to our experts in the show.
Thank you, Friso. So my name is Andries ten Haan. I'm an architect at Wortel. Around 20 years of experience in technology and focusing on governance, best practices, and especially large migrations. That brings us actually to the topic of tonight. We're going to talk about migrations and how we can make that complex process a bit more tangible, a bit more easy, and we're going to share our experiences on how we standardize that within Wortel to help our customers in a better way. So, introduction will be done by Sander, and we'll have some demos around migration tooling. We'll do some technical stuff, some fun stuff, and yeah, if you have any questions, use the hashtag AskWortel. Friso will let us know, and then we'll be able to answer them during the live stream. So, Sander, can you start?
Yes. Well, first of all, we need to address the perimeter. So before we start migrating, we have to do a little bit of analysis. And let me take you a little bit back. The last couple of years, we saw that employees started working in more and more teams. Where working in the office was the norm, work now went remote. Therefore, the need for online collaboration with companies grew, and this collaboration expanded to outside the boundaries of the corporation. We started working online with customers, with suppliers, etc. So where we have your traditional companies, where your data is always within your trusted parameter, your network, there is a shift where your data needs to be accessible everywhere. At the customer site, at a coffee shop, at home, on your laptop, on your phone, in your car, you name it. Everybody needs to be connected at every time. Personally, I almost cannot remember the day that I had to work with file shares, but I see many a customer doing just that. And I also see that traditional file shares limit the productivity potential. It stops being from as productive as they can be. And that is why we see a lot of migrations nowadays. Many companies designed their IT environment to work from the office and not so much outside it. Not being able to access or work together on documents is one of the biggest productivity killers, especially now with the COVID disruption. And the COVID disruption also skyrocketed the need for online collaboration. As we see in the slide, the COVID effect on online work. We see with COVID a drastic increase in use of Microsoft Teams, but we also see an expansion of the traditional office hours. So that has two effects. Everybody knows that currently everybody is working in Teams or some other online tooling. But we also see the tendency, because we're working online, to move our hours from 9 to 5, from 9 to 6 to 7 to 8, to being almost at a 24-hour rate. So that brings us with several different business challenges. Business challenges we currently have in the basis, we all have our general business challenges. We have the search. We have disconnected silos of information. We have to the protecting our intellectual property. We have a tacit knowledge, and that we need to keep. The tacit knowledge, that is the knowledge that is in your head. It's just like experience. You just know you have to do it this or that way. That is especially difficult to grasp, and that's something that we will show you at the end of this presentation. When working on a content migration, because that is what we are talking about today. When working on a content migration, you should always consider your own business challenges, but the ones I just mentioned, search, disconnected silos, those are the business problems in general that all companies are struggling with. So, Andres, now we see these challenges. Do you think Microsoft can help us to get rid of these challenges?
Yes, absolutely. I think you will show a little bit on that at the end of the presentation. But basically, moving your files to the cloud, you can benefit from the ongoing collaboration capabilities that Microsoft provides. Since I think halfway last year, sharpened syntax was introduced, which adds an additional layer of intelligence in your collaboration processes. So it will be really easy to collaborate on content, tag content, and retrieve it by searching it in the cloud. So,
okay,
yeah.
Yes, definitely. So I just talked about your IT environment, where your data is inside your own company, your own network. So now we have to see how we can provide our employees with online capabilities, and Microsoft is certainly able to help us with that with their Office 365 offering. And I personally look at the Office 365 offering as my personal playground, my personal Lego box. I have a giant box of Lego, and all the services are different Lego boxes, as we can see in the next slide. So we have the usual suspects on the left of the screen: your Teams, your SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, Jammer, Office, but we also have the Power Platform, we have BI capabilities, we have artificial intelligence, machine learning, we have Azure Storage, we have Intune, we have all kinds of different Lego boxes that we can use. And besides all those all these services, we have to make sure that our data is also secure. So we can put them in Office 365 and we're done. We need to make sure that the data is really secure. We have to be able to be compliant. We have to make sure that we can collaborate on a safe manner. We have to make sure that we don't lose our data, because I just in the beginning I told you that our car is currently everywhere. It's in the coffee shop. It's on my laptop. It's on my device. We have to make sure that we don't lose our company data, and therefore we have to make sure that we set up several rules to be make sure that we are compliant and that we can collaborate. In general, we call that governance. That's what we can do. And all these dependencies, that is what makes a document migration complex. You can see it here. When we put it all together, we have the Office 365 services, we have our business challenges, we have to make sure that we have to secure our data, we have business requirements that we have to uphold, and of course, in the end, we also have your company's data. And all these factors we have to take into account when we are migrating data to Office 365.
Okay.
Yes?
Yeah, thank you, Sander. So this seems like a very complex environment. So there's the services, there's the security part, there's the governance part. So you don't have any sites that are outside of control, that you don't get exponential growth of sites with a short life term and what have you. And there you have the data. So basically, that's the main focus of tonight, right? So we have these challenges around leveraging the services and designing a proper and secure environment. But essentially, collaboration is around that data, and that data needs to get into the cloud as fast as can be and as successful as can be, right? So, yeah, how do we do that? How do we design that future?
Well, yeah, we need to design for that. We need to design for the future, indeed. Because, but before we can do that, we need to know what we are dealing with. We need to know the size of the data, the structure of the data. We have to know something about data ownership, about the usage of the data. And of course, we have to know about the requirements. Why do we want to move to Office 365? What are the benefits that we are trying to achieve? So we need to know a lot. So putting that all together is very complex. Migrations aren't easy. And that is what this session is mainly about. Removing the complexity of this vast field. Because in general, we are working on several areas. And if you look at the big picture, it's gigantic. It's huge. But then we have to focus on the little parts in order to reduce that complexity. Because Andres, we've done a lot of projects together. In your general opinion, when we tell customers that migrations are complex, it's not a simple copy-paste action. How do they react?
Yeah, so basically, they're actually telling us we have a migration problem. It's a complex challenge. We're reluctant to start it because of the complexity. And basically, their reaction on the topic of migrations is being reluctant to execute those projects. Because where do they start? How do they ensure that they do the right actions in the right order? Make the right decisions on data, what data do they take to the cloud, and what data should be archived or maybe even disposed of. So a lot of questions that customers are struggling with. And at Wortel, we actually have looked at those projects, and yeah, we have broken down that whole migration challenge into tangible pieces.
Why did we? What's the advantage of that? What's the advantage of?
So breaking it up in different pieces gives a certain scope to what you want to achieve with, for instance, analyzing the data, designing your collaboration environment, designing the migration technical parts. So you ensure that you have the migration tooling. We'll talk about it later. Creating a plan and basically migrating, where you ensure that there's business continuity, that people are properly supported and guided through their new intelligent workspace. Yeah.
And when we look at when we are going to talk to a customer, in your general opinion, how much time does a general customer expect that a migration takes? How long do we have in general for a migration?
Yeah, so that really depends on the customer. So some customers have done a lot of research up front before they start to work with us, and they have a certain idea of how long a migration should take. But basically, the focus there is on the actual copying part of the migration project, rather than covering the most important parts like discovery and design and planning. Basically, the migration part, in terms of efforts, is relatively low compared to the design, discover, design, and plan activities. So there's a difference in perspective on how customers look at that. So,
yeah, correct. That's my opinion also. They need results really quick, and I really understand that, because we don't need the results yesterday. We need them the day before yesterday, because tomorrow we need something new, because the world has changed. And that is why we started looking at our migrations project. And well, big surprise, they are all different, but they all have the same structure, as we can see in the next slide. We looked at the migration process, and we discovered a couple of major topics: discovery, design, plan, and migrate. So every time we did the same: eat, sleep, migrate, repeat. We did the same. When I went to a customer, I did it my way, as somebody once said. I did the discovery phase, I did the design phase, I did the plan phase, and we did the migration phase. If you would do it, Andries, you would probably reach the same result, but you would do it in a different way. If other colleagues would do it, they did the same steps, but also in their own manner. So we started looking at these four pillars, and we started creating building blocks. And building block is something that you can reproduce. So we started creating templates, as you were, to facilitate those different phases. And at first, there was nothing more. For the discovery, we had a template for a PowerPoint that we had. That was it. But over time, we started working on that template, and we started adding stuff. So over time, we looked at the discovery phase, and we looked at the design phase. And with the design phase, we saw we had requirements that we needed to figure out. So we created a template for a workshop preparation. We created a PowerPoint. We created several PowerPoints for different workshops that we need to do. We created templates to store the requirements that were the end result of a workshop. And when we start a project, we do that by using DevOps. So we also started building a template for DevOps with epics, with features, with PBIs, with tasks and everything. And we can just upload them to DevOps and we can start. Let's see. Sorry for that.
Yeah, so Sander, maybe we'll have a look at the discovery phase and one of the other solutions we created to facilitate that process. So we have a solution that can help to perform the inventories. Maybe a quick check, Friso, do we have any questions before we continue?
Yes, we had one question, but I think you already pretty much answered it. We had a question from RV saying, good evening. How long does a migration project take? Like, can you give an estimation on how long it takes to migrate a file share, something around 5 terabytes and 10 million files?
Okay, maybe we can park that question when we go to that particular part of the session. I'll keep the question in mind so we can give it some more perspective around it.
All right, sure. Then we'll come back later.
Yeah. Okay. So back to Sander and me. So for the discovery phase, one of the important aspects is knowing what your data is all about. So data structures, ownership, as Sander mentioned, sizing. For instance, sizing can be very important to determine migration speed and the time related to that. So apart from the other aspects we have in the discovery phase, we came up with a solution to automate the data analysis and reporting on that. So let's have a look at a demo for that. So let's share my desktop. So what we have over here is what we call the inventory scan. So this is a solution we designed to automate the file share analysis part, or actually the inventory part used prior to analysis. And we're going to use that. I'll explain to you in a minute what this solution is all about. But we're going to work with some sample migration sources. So we have a couple of directories with some files in there, which are prepped for this presentation. So we can use that in the real life demos. Back to the inventory scan. So what we did is we had a look at what would be the best tool to facilitate that inventory phase. So we came up with tree size. And those of you that are familiar with file share migrations may have already looked at that. But we went further than just using that tool out of the box. So we created a solution around it using a PowerShell. And we basically made a solution that's very flexible and provides us with a number of standard reports. So we have a configuration part. So there's a couple of XML files that hold the configuration on what we expect in the reports from tree size. We have an input list. So this contains the path on what we want to see. So in this case, we're going to scan the start of that migration source. And we have a logging folder, which will contain telemetry about the scans we're performing. So each scan can take a certain amount of time. We register that. And there's the certain reports that will be output into this folder. So let me just bring you to the actual tree size scan. So there are a couple of things to it. I won't go into the nitty-gritty details, but we split up the solution in a number of functions. So there's a start tree size scan, which basically holds all the logic to conduct the scan. And then we have a number of parameters to ensure that tree size is linked to the solution, that we can read the configuration, that we have those logging locations, input files, and for instance, we can have a prefix for the files we'll generate. So if you're doing it for a certain customer, in this case Contoso, all the report files will have that prefix in the name. And then we have a number of scans we can perform. Let me just go to that part. So there's a folder scan, which will be typically used to basically map from your source structure to a structure in Microsoft Teams or SharePoint Online or channels within a team. There's a files scan, which is basically a row level file scan. So those files become very large. There's an H scan, file types, top users, and top files. So there's a lot of typical things that you'll find in those reports that will help you to speed up your analysis afterwards. So everything comes together in executing that start tree size scan for each row in the input list. And let's just have a look at that. So I need to log in. Usually you have a server account that is used to perform those scans. And you can see it's now performing a folder scan. The thing we configured right now is folder H and file type scan. So we'll expect 3 reports. So they're done. So let's have a look at the outcome. Let's first have a look at the logs. So there's a telemetry log. Let me open it up. Come on. So you can basically set your delimiter for each of those files. So you can see, for instance, the folder scan took around 6 seconds. And same goes for the H, and file types was around 6 seconds. So I think like a terabyte is around 20 minutes or so. So let's have a look at the actual reports. So let's first open up the H scan. This can help us to determine if there's any overdue data that we should exclude from the migration. And as you can see over here, this is the output of the report. There's categories 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, and over 4 years. And basically the configuration file determines what those categories are, and you can configure that in tree size itself. So it's very flexible. And you can see around 29% almost is 1 year or less. And around 15% is 2 to 3 years, and over 4 years there's even that's the bigger part. So let's say this category is around 7 years or 10 years or even more. This could be very important in setting a certain date filter on your migration to determine what you want to migrate. So if your threshold is everything less than 5 or 7 years, you would filter out those older files, and you would still have to make sure that those files are properly disposed of or maybe archived, but at least you know where your bottlenecks are. So this is one. I'm going to skip file types for now. Folders is, I think, the most interesting. That's also the biggest one for now. Let me just make it a little bit bigger, not too big. So what you see over here is basically all the folders, and it will also show you how many files are in there. So that's quite important. And what the bigger parts are of that folder structure. It will also show you last modified, last access date, and creation date. That will also be the output of the file level, the file level reports. And you can also have the DIR level shown over here. So that might help you to maybe reduce the report and start focusing on maybe the first 3 levels. So you can really use this in the workshops to determine in the end how you want to map your existing structures against the newly created structures that you might have designed in your governance plan. It will also provide you with information on path length, which is also an interesting topic. So there are certain limitations in path length in Office 365 we need to consider. So that can be the combination of a folder structure plus the file name, or just the folder structure, or just the file name by itself. And if this exceeds a certain threshold, you need to take care of it. So shorten the links, and that would be something that the business would do. You won't do that from a technology perspective, right? You won't touch the business data. Maybe in the end, the file types. I'll just have a look at it quickly. So here you see a category structure. So this is what tree size actually provides. That's some of the benefit it brings, which shows you the amount of files within a certain category. So 90% is Office files and documents, but you might also have maybe some configuration files or bigger container files, right? With files as big as a couple of gigabytes, like virtual DVD images from back in the days, or maybe very large files, and that large zip files. So that can be useful also in determining and slicing and dicing your data. So basically this tool provides you with a rather automated approach to getting the insights and outsides of your data. So, okay. Back to you, Sander.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. The demo is always very nice to see. So we are working on the artifacts of these building blocks. Each time we do a migration, we use all these artifacts, the PowerPoints, the document templates, the third-party tools Andries just showed. We use our scripts, our DevOps templates, and we learn from them. We learn what can we do better with each migration. With everybody in the field doing a migration, every migration has its quirks. Every time you learn something new, which means that you run in some sort of error that you didn't have before. So we get lessons learned. So we update our artifacts, and then we implement these new artifacts in our way of working, and we train our consultants. Andries, when we look at the tooling, we use, you just showed a tool, but
yeah,
we can also do this with PowerShell or any other custom development. Why do we use TreeView for this?
Yeah, so tree size was our preferred choice, as within the discussions within our team, we noticed that a lot of people were using that, or our customers were already using that. And these tools were quite powerful in the information that they would produce to support the analysis for your migration. So there were a lot of benefits. And if we look at the slides around the tree size solution, let's bring it up. Oh, one back. Oh,
I have the slide.
Yeah, okay, here we go. So tree size it's from Gem Software, so we could fully automate it using PowerShell scripting, and we could standardize the insight. So the benefit to us was that before it would take a lot of time to get the right columns in your reports, and now we're all using the same approach, and that basically is a time saver. And on the other hand, there's a very flexible configuration. So for a specific customer situation, we could add or remove certain columns in the reports, and basically using this solution, we could make this a lot quicker. And the additional benefit of tree size is also that we can use their consultant license program. So we're allowed to use tree size from Wortel at a customer size and perform the inventories which we need without the customer having to go through the burden of purchasing the solution. So I think that's quite a big benefit.
Yeah, what I personally like with a tool, for now tree sized in particular, we used to go to the customer site or do it remotely or whatever, and then we had to dig into the file shares and we had to work our PowerShells and we had to work our tools, and now we have this building block. We get our files, we get our software, we install it in 5 minutes. We do a little bit of configuration, let's say 30 minutes, we press play, and if you have a file share of several terabytes, well, we get 2 or 3 cups of coffee, and the results are there. And they are there in a manner that we expect. So we can get results very quickly, and we can report on them and get to the next step. And that's one other very big benefit of working with building blocks. They make your migration predictable. And if they are predictable, we can do better planning ahead. And yeah, that's what I really, really love about this way of working.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're going to talk a bit more about tooling later on, because there's also tooling for the actual migration, but there's also best practices. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's go to the next slide. This is an interesting one. So we've done our analysis, right? And then we have to look at the migration design. And this is especially interesting if your sizes go up. So if there's bigger piles of data that you need to migrate, bigger data sets. And what we have over here is some of the recommendations we got from Microsoft and the SharePoint Desktop product teams. And let me go through a couple of those. So one of the things that is very important is to limit a particular migration job, and you can have several running in parallel, to 200,000 or 300,000 files per migration job. So if you exceed those numbers, the migration API, which is at the beginning of the data center at Microsoft, basically the hub in Azure before you go to SharePoint Online, is optimal when using those kind of sizes. So if you exceed those sizes, the performance of your migration might go down within that Azure hub before it actually is being copied to the end structure within Microsoft Teams or SharePoint Online. That's one.
Yep.
Another recommendation is don't migrate large amounts of data to a single site. So the capacity of a SharePoint site is up to 25 terabytes. But that's basically adding a couple of files when people start to collaborate. Migrating 25 terabytes to a single site is not a best practice. Basically, it's a worst. So and so are lower volumes up to 1 terabyte. So there's 2 million sites per tenant. I think that's the last set of service level descriptions. So there's a lot of room to split up your data into smaller parts. And within, by splitting the data up in smaller parts, your migration performance will go up. So 3 or 4 or maybe 5 smaller migrations compared to one big migration, which is very slow. So that's another best practice. Also, limit the amount of simultaneous operations. So I did talk about doing operations in parallel, but from a single server. Don't start up like 3, 4, or 5 migrations at the same time if they have a reasonable amount of data behind them. Coming back to that question about how much time it would take to perform migration. So I think the question was around 5 terabytes worth of data to migrate. There's a couple of factors that we need to consider. So it's the local network. You're basically migrating from a local file share to the Microsoft data center. So if your local network has some network limitations, that could be a factor. Also, the performance of the server where you are performing the migrations. But in general, typical file share migrations, so with an average of 1.5 megabytes per file, it should be feasible to Microsoft to perform a 1 terabyte a day migration. The practice we have, Sander, please elaborate if you also have those experiences available. 1 terabyte should probably take up to 48 hours. That's basically a rule of thumb we use. So I think the Microsoft estimates are very optimistic.
Yeah, I agree. My personal rule of thumb, and my personal rule of thumb is 20 gigabytes per hour. If you have a fast network, it can go up. If you have a slower network or other factors, they will drop. And in the slide you mentioned the 1.5 megabyte average file size, and that is also very important because it's not only the total amount of gigabytes, but it's also the size. If you have a gazillion very small size or a few very, very, very big files, that also adds to the equation. So what we in general always try to do is do a test migration. So we get a good data set in terms of size and volume. So not only we take, let's say, 100 gigabytes of data, but we also make sure that we have a nice average of the files.
Yeah, exactly.
And we try to migrate that and see how it performs.
Yeah. Thanks, Sander.
Throttling to you.
Yeah, thanks. So another recommendation is, and especially with the whole COVID situation, is that Microsoft does more throttling during business hours to have Microsoft Teams, for instance, perform in a reasonable way. So throttling is less outside of typical business hours. So during evenings and weekends, you'll probably have a better performance than during business hours. Data migrations are still possible, and sometimes it's even required, especially when you do like a first initial copy. But there will be a little bit more throttling than outside of those business hours. So we talked about the analysis. We talked a little bit about best practice. Let's also talk about choosing the right tool for the job. There are a lot of tools out there, but these are the tools that we work with the most. So, for instance, SharePoint Migration Tool, which is actually a tool that's being improved with every new release. It's free. and it supports both SharePoint Server, so local SharePoint Server implementations, file shares, and it also provides PowerShell support, so you can script migrations in bulk. One of the limitations is that it's only usable for migrations from on-premises to the cloud. So it's not a cloud-to-cloud migration solution. If you're doing really big but relatively simple file migrations, consider the Migration Manager. So Microsoft has been releasing versions of this tool throughout the recent past, and it's also free. So it's file share only, but one of the aspects here is it's very scalable. So it works with an agent model where there can be multiple migration servers that can be orchestrated by the SharePoint Admin Center in Microsoft 365. And basically, I'll show you in a minute, you can have a look at the available agents and see which one is available, and it will pick up on the migration task at hand. They recently updated the solution also that the reports can be downloaded from the migration manager in the SharePoint Admin Center. So you can use a PowerShell to basically download those files and, well, have a look at those that information. And there's new features coming later, later this year. So we might even see a solution where we would basically upload programmatically the batch jobs that you want to migrate. Just a minute. So Mover, which was purchased by Microsoft, it's also a free tool, and well, basically, I think there's a small mismatch in there. It's not only files. Yeah, it's files only, but it's cloud to cloud, so you can use it between clouds to perform a tenant-to-tenant migration, but you can also perform a file share migration. So you can also install a local agent that has access to your local file shares, and then it can upload those files. And I think if we have enough time, we'll have a look at it, and we can basically show you a demo as well. Apart from that, cloud to cloud, it performs migration from Google Drive, Dropbox, Azure, Amazon S3, and even Ignite. And there's more integration coming to well, basically integrate this tool into the Microsoft look and feel and functionality as we speak. So there's, I think, already previews going on that. And the last tool, I think that's being used the most by our team is ShareGate Desktop. Mm-hmm. So apart from the first three, that's a commercial tool. It's really flexible. It's not only migrations, it's also reporting. It supports SharePoint Server. It supports file shares, Google Drive, Box. And one of the important things here is that it can also support more complex scenarios. So basically creating or filtering out a subset of data that you want to migrate. And SharePoint Migration Tool, Migration Manager, and Mover are less capable of performing those actions. So that's another aspect to that. It's really rich when it comes to PowerShell support. Recently, so in the last couple of months, they've been adding a lot of capabilities to support tenant-to-tenant Teams migrations. And that's not only whole teams and all the artifacts within those, but also on a channel level. So there's a lot of capabilities that are being added. And I think releases are like on a monthly basis. And it's not only migration, as I mentioned. So there's only there's also reporting capabilities. So once you're in the cloud, or you can even use that on premises, you can do certain reports on lists, on libraries, on pages, on users. And there's also content management that you can do. So check in, out files in bulk. And what's important in the use of ShareGate, because I think a lot of people that might be logged in tonight that are using ShareGate, you can register ShareGate as an Azure AD desktop application. So that will provide you with an optimal performance, as it will register ShareGate in Azure AD. So it basically has access to the graph in a delegated manner, and will boost the performance of the migration. Sander, any other comments you want to add to that? Or shall we
really.
have a look at
ShareGate is my personal favorite, although the SharePoint migration tool is gaining momentum. But indeed, I think enough talk. Let's. Can you show us some migration?
Yeah. So what we have over here, so we have a live event site for tonight, which has a couple of documents, and we can actually browse to the document library. And the idea is that we migrate the data into this location. So let's first have a look if we can get the migration manager to perform its task. So let me open up the SharePoint Admin Center. There's migration. And we can actually go to the file share. Let's have a look if my agent is online. I'm gonna make my screen a little bit. It's hardly visible, but in the end, so at the bottom of the page, we'll add some tasks, and there's agents. So what I talked about before is that we can have a number of agents. So this agent is called VIP001, and we can have a lot of those depending on the amount of shares that we need to migrate. And the install on a server is quite simple. So you have a Windows server, you install the agent on it, you enter the credentials once, and then the agent is available, which is commented here in Dutch. And we can add additional ones or rename them or remove them if we feel the need for that. So there's also common settings. So the only thing I did here is that I uploaded a user mapping. So we can map the user from the source environment to the destination environment. And let's add a task. So there are certain methods. I can add a single source and destination, but for this demo, obviously, I'd like to do a bulk migration because that's just more cool. So let me go to my location. So the user mapping I've already uploaded, and this is the bulk migration. Let's just open it up quickly in the text editor. So it has a couple of headers: source path, destination path, and tags. So, oh, this is the wrong one actually. This is the one for mover. Here we go. So it has the source location. So there's a file share called live event, which is actually, the data is also there on the migration server, and that will be brought into the documents library on the SharePoint side. That's basically the structure, and you can repeat those relations, source and destination, on each row. Okay, import those, validating the file, it's correct. Give it a name. So it's being added, and if we have multiple rows, it will create a different row for each task in the input file. So that will take a minute to being picked up by the agent, and in a minute it will start to migrate. Let's not wait on that. Let's go back to migration, And let's have a look at Mover, which is also linked now from the migration page in the SharePoint Admin Center. Let's log in. Use my Microsoft account. Here we go. This is cool. We're doing stuff simultaneously. So Mover works with agents. So currently I've connected an agent to my local machine. I think we should be able to see it. Let's open it up quickly. So this is basically the Mover agent, which is really easy to install, and that has access to my file shares. I'll leave it open. We'll review that later. So we're going to connect to the agent. And on the other end, we're going to connect to our destination environment. Until it loads, it will show you those errors. So this one is okay. Connector is no longer authorized. Oh. Let's authorize this again. It's authorizing.
It's a real demo.
Oh no. Demo gods, help me out. I'll pick up the key again. So this is basically you use the key to connect between the source and the destination. Come on. It is connected, right? So let's just start it up again. Oh. Connecting. I have my, I think there might be an issue at the Mover side. It doesn't matter because we had the other one running. So let's have a look back at the migration manager. So that's also still waiting. No. It will pick it up, I think, in a minute. Oh, did it just change? No. Oh no.
With the migration manager, where are you migrating to documents or to demo?
Yeah, to documents, but basically it's so the agent is available. It's waiting to perform a task, and now it's taking a longer time than I timed my demos before. So we can use that time in a proper way. Because I can also explain you a bit more about a bit more complex solution we have. That's called the data migration factory. Let's go to that part. And the data migration factory is...
sorry, I will be monitoring the documents library.
Yeah,
so if it's
excellent. Yeah. So the data migration factory is something we use for large-scale migration. So we're talking about 5 terabytes and up, 10 terabytes, 100, and even we've been talking to customers that have around 1 petabyte or more. So it's a fully automated solution from the inventory part to the reporting part to data stewards and data owners making decisions on a web portal where they decide whether or not to migrate data to a new site, to an existing site. And it can link to SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams, which for file migrations is actually SharePoint. And it has a couple of inventory clients. We could call them agents also. So there's a fileshare inventory client, and that's being scheduled on a regular basis to go through all of the file shares that are within scope of the project. There's a sharpened inventory client for 2013 and one for 2010. And there's a couple of migration servers. And currently, we've built a solution around the use of ShareGate. So fully automate ShareGate to tell ShareGate to perform a certain migration, or actually a couple of steps. And it's being all managed from a central database. So all the information is on a central database opposed to separate Excel sheets or CSV files and what have you. And the data can also be enriched by using the Azure Information Protection Scanner or Sensitive Data Inventory Client, which can actually enrich the information that's being scanned through Azure Log Analytics. So we can get information around sensitive data being found in those file shares or SharePoint sites, like financial data, credit card numbers, or even medical or personal identifiable data. So that's very important that to consider when you move your data to the cloud in terms of compliance. And so we have the web portal, we have the database, and then we have the migration servers. And on those migration servers, we have ShareGate as a tool. And we also have a couple of scripts. And that's where the fun starts. So this solution basically supports the SharePoint migration tool, but also ShareGate. And we have a number of PowerShell modules. So these contain all the logic we use. So factory data access contains a PowerShell module with everything that's needed to connect to the database and query the database on any data that needs to be migrated or being put into the inventory. And then we have specific SharePoint migration capabilities. So let's open it up. And basically, we have all the capabilities in here to perform a migration of a folder and also create the log files to perform those migrations. And the same goes for the ShareGate migration. So we're flexible in using that. So we have functions to connect to a site, to migrate a folder, to set mappings, to create the property templates. These are all standardized, and this is just a subset of what we actually have. And we can use that to perform really complex migrations and highly automated migrations. Let's see in the meanwhile how we're doing with the actual demo. Oh, I see something. I saw migration being started there. So it's 0%, so it's still working on stuff. See if we got any movement on mover. Yeah, it's still having a problem connecting to the mover data center. Let's see.
The demo gods aren't with us tonight, Andries.
Not for that one. Mover, come on. Connecting to Bitfrost. So this is the mover infrastructure. So I think there's like an outage on that. We won't be able to finish that, I think. Yeah. Ooh, in the meanwhile, we did get a proper result. So let's just have a look at the report. So we have 100% completion, 10 files out of 10 migrated, and there's a task report we can use.
Woohoo!
And these task reports are actually quite useful. So there's a lot of information in there. They also show the number of gigabytes per hour, which is really important when you're doing your test migrations and estimating how long the actual migration will take. So in a minute, we'll have a look at the data. there's one topic I forgot to mention, which is really important. That's about a practice on incremental versus delta migrations. So tools like ShareGate have the option to perform an incremental migration. And an incremental migration basically means first you do a full migration. So that's the first bar over here, which copies over all the data. So that's very often that's like a two-step approach. You first copy over all the data. So if it's that 5 terabyte that was being talked about before, that takes a lot of time, right? So it takes a couple of days, and that won't fit into like a cutover weekend or a cutover evening to go live with that data. So usually this is like the first step. And then tools provide things. So that's the third bar. I'm jumping to the third bar there. An incremental migration. An incremental migration basically checks all the files in the source. Have they been changed? Are there any additions there? So it takes a lot of time to actually check those files. And basically, it doesn't take the same amount of time as the full migration, but still a really big amount of time opposed to a delta migration. So what we do over there is, for instance, we register the start of the full migration, and people are still working then in those source environments when their files are being copied over. And we register that moment, that timestamp, and we use that as a date filter to, well, basically get the last pieces in there. So the files that were added or changed since the start of the full migration. And that's like a really small subset. So I didn't want to, I did want to share that during that session tonight. So back to the demo. We should have a filled document library. So
Yep.
really simple demo, but the importance here is it's in the cloud now, and we can actually leverage the intelligence in there. And I'd like to go back to Sander to finish up with the benefits you get when the data is in there and working with things like SharePoint syntax.
Yes. Well, the demo gods aren't with us tonight, so let's hope they start working for syntax. I don't know if you guys and girls heard about Microsoft Syntax. Syntax is really new. It's GA for a couple of months now, and Syntax in a nutshell, Syntax uses AI to analyze and recognize and extract metadata from documents automatically. So no more hassling with manual entering metadata and telling SharePoint that this is an invoice or that this is a resume. The beauty of it is this is nothing. This is not something new. We could do this for quite some time now, but in order for AI to recognize a document, we had to upload hundreds, maybe thousands of documents. And then AI started recognizing those documents. With Syntax, you only have to upload 5 documents and one that is a different one. So you need to upload 6 documents and you say, okay, this is an invoice or this is a resume. And after that, you can publish the model to a library, as we did here in the live event. And when you add documents to it, Syntax will recognize them and will automatically extract the metadata from it. So when we look at the demo environment, again, we see the uploaded documents, and they are all of the content type document. And I don't know what we did to upset the demo gods, but they are truly not happy with us because, yes.
Yeah, they're coming, I
It
think.
takes a while, but they are coming. As you see, these documents are all of the type document. That means that SharePoint has no idea what it is. It's just a document. But in the background, Syntax is processing these documents and is saying, hey, I see this is an invoice, and I see it has an invoice number, and it has a date, and all this metadata is automatically extracted from it. And that has the great benefit that you can step away from the manual process where employees certainly do not want to enter metadata. They don't want to. They have other things to do, so they do it very quickly, and they make errors. They don't intend to, but they make errors, and that is why why Syntax is taking over. But then we have an invoice, we have a content type, and we have the metadata. Well, is that a big deal? Well, we think it is, because we have a demo prepared with the same set of data where the information is extracted, and we see here a retention label. We need to, in the beginning of this presentation of this Ask Wortel, we talked about being compliant. An invoice for a financial company, for instance, in the Netherlands has to be kept for, let's say, 7 years. I don't know if it's correct, but it's just a sample. So if we upload a document to SharePoint, then a user, an employee, must know, okay, this, I have to mark this as an invoice. And it is uploaded on this date. So I cannot, I shouldn't remove it for the next couple of, for the next 7 years. All stuff that the employee has to remember. Now Syntax comes in, recognizes the document, says it's an invoice, it extracts the metadata, it sees that a retention label is connected to this content type, Contoso factuur, and it automatically added the retention label. So Syntax is an enabler for being auto-compliant. I don't know about you, but I think this is a great, really, really great tool.
There's a lot of companies yeah, Sander, a lot of companies used to have like really rich metadata structures, and they would instruct their employees to enter those metadata manually,
Yes.
right? And to some extent, if there were custom development, it would be automated. But my experience is that after some time, the discipline fades, and you get a lot of data without being tagged properly, so you're not compliant and your data is less searchable and what have you. So Syntax is really filling a gap there.
Yeah, and I think that it's even worse, the example you just told, because you have data that has probably been tagged and you have data that isn't probably tagged, so you have 2 times nothing, and it's, yeah, then it's getting really messy. And we have been working with Microsoft for the last year, being a charter partner for Syntax, and we have tested this extensively, and currently the results are actually extremely good. This really works. And
that's really good news.
Yeah, when you look back at when Teams was introduced a couple of years ago, it worked, but it lacked all kinds of functionality. Currently, Teams is the #1 go-to tool, and when we look at Syntax, I actually expected something similar, but this just works. And yeah, it really great. And especially the integration with retention labels, or the integration with Power Apps, because if this is an invoice that comes into your Office 365 system, and let's say that this invoice has an amount less than €1,000, then we have a rule at our company that it can automatically be booked into our financial system, and it can be moved to a supplier, or other actions that you want to take that you normally would do manually. You can just using Power Automate to automate all these steps. And yeah, well, that's a real productivity benefit.
And we come full circle with the Lego blocks approach, right? So
yeah, we actually are going to build a real nice Lego world.
Yeah.
I
have more good news apart from syntax. I have the mover demo ready. So if we have some time left, then we could switch over to that demo and have a quick look at that.
Maybe a quick Q&A in between, or do you want to move that to the final part, Friso?
Yeah, let's do the final demo for this one. Or Friso, you want to do the Q&A first?
No, sure, we can do it at the end. It's fine.
Okay. So this is like a couple of minutes. So I got the connection to the infrastructure from Mover, and now on the left side you see that I have the connection to the actual data in our sample files. On the right side we have SharePoint, so we can continue to our migration. There's a lot of UI which I'm not going to go through to in detail, but basically your dashboard is at the top. So all the transfers and scans that can be performed, so pre-checks on whether or not data is ready to migrate, is shown at the top. And if we start to scan, we can actually bring up the data from both the source and destination, and there will be some automated mapping. But for this demo, I'm going to add a migration manually. And basically I can choose a file with a source and destination. Let's go to my mover book migration file. It will show up over here. And basically when I'm ready, I can actually start to migrate this data set. I'm going to do it right now. And it's fairly quick, I might add. So I think it might be even challenging ShareGate, which is not always in par in terms of performance. So there's pre-checks going on. It will start to migrate soon, and it will land that data soon in this live event folder. So pre-checks. Friso, while we're waiting, let's have a look at those incoming questions.
Yeah, sure. We have one first coming from Leonard Veerbrink. He actually asked us, how do you work with big SharePoint sites where people would like to sync to their PC or tablet?
So I suppose those are, I'm doing some assumptions here that those are sites in SharePoint Online. So they've already been, the data has already been copied over to the cloud. So there we can benefit from things like files on demand. So basically you could create a connection from your OneDrive sync client to that particular SharePoint site, and it will download the metadata and placeholders for those files to your local drive. So when browsing through those folders via the OneDrive sync client, you would have the same experience as those files were downloaded locally, but they're not until you open those files specifically. And it's pretty obvious that you won't open like 100% of those files on your desktop. And files on demand is intelligent enough that if you have if you're outlived the use of those files on your local machine, you simply shift those files back to the cloud, and they will still be stored in the cloud, and you only have those placeholders locally. So that's pretty easy to facilitate. I hope that answered the question. So maybe Leonard can give a quick note on that question. So.
All right, and the next one, you showed us some PowerShell scripts earlier. Will these be available to the community?
So we have a GitHub from Wortel. Let's just quickly bring it up. Yeah, okay, so Leonard says thanks. Thanks, Leonard, for saying thanks. So we have a data migration repo for on the Wortel GitHub. I can share that. Well, we can maybe share that later on in the chat.
Description.
And there's some items in here, some scripts that will help you to, for instance, authenticate securely and high performance to Sharpened Online using the PnP PowerShell, but also reporting. So there's a comparison script in there to compare files in the source and destination. So basically in a migration, you have your migration reports, which are not always something that the business can work with, but also doing a comparison of the number of files in the source and destination will help you basically to prove that your migration is okay. So we have that available as well. Oh, we are done. Yeah, so
yep,
it was a good switch to the questions. Yeah, so success. We didn't have any issues or failures, and indeed, as Sander mentioned, the data is there. Yeah, I didn't do any user mapping, so basically it uses the system account right now. But that's the way Mover works, and I'm not sure what happened that I couldn't connect, but the performance is pretty decent. So there's not a lot of files I had to upload, but it didn't take a lot of time to actually upload those, and it actually brought over all the metadata that I was expecting. So okay, yeah. So there's lots more to tell, but I think we've outlived our session. I think it was originally scheduled for an hour, and we were 22 minutes afterwards. It has been fun. Do you agree, Sander? I think it was an interesting session.
Yep.
Any final remarks?
No, not for me. I think it was a very long session, longer than we intended to, but somehow when we sit at the table, Andries, it takes a lot longer than we anticipated.
Yeah, and I think we're not even done talking, right? You can tell lots more about syntax, and I think you're going to, right? Soon,
yep.
Or in
we're going to do a lot more sessions. Martin Kras also did some sessions on did a session on syntax. So maybe it's nice to look at that session. But there's lots more coming. Yes.
Yeah, and the same goes for the migration. So we're doing more stuff in this year on developing our building blocks, and maybe doing some smaller sessions, writing some blogs on various topics to help people out there to boost their performance of their migrations and the quality and what have you. So yeah, okay, good. So let's wrap it up.
Right.
Thanks everybody for attending.
One more thing, Andries. The winner, of course, of the best question of the evening is Leonard Veenbrink. If it's right, there should be a box to my left, I think. Yes. You can send an email there, and then we will send you the code for a €50 Amazon gift card. And well, thank you for watching, everyone.
Yeah, keep it inside for just a couple of seconds longer, maybe. That we are sure that Leonard can write it down. Otherwise, it's werken at Wortel.